Welcome to the Renault Megane RS 280, which you might be thinking we've already done a review of. And yes, we did do a review from the launch down in Spain, but if you remember, we could only drive the Cup chassis option on the track down there. Hopefully we get it in the UK. Try it here. If you want a quick recap, the Megane RS 280 has 276 brake horsepower and 288 pounds-foot of torque. That's more than a Golf GTI, but less than a Civic Type R. It hits 62 miles an hour in 5.8 seconds and will reach 158 miles an hour flat out. It also now has four-wheel steering, like a 911 GT3 or Ferrari 812. It's only available as a 5-door in an effort to make it more appealing as everyday transport, and it weighs in at 1430 kilos, which is pretty chunky for a hot hatch. However, I think it looks tremendous, particularly from the rear, where it has the stance of a miniature touring car. Now the Cup chassis option costs £1,500, and for that, principally, you get a mechanical limited slip diff in the front axle, which instantly really makes it the car to have, because with 280 horsepower, you can't really put that through the front wheels without a limited slip diff. You can, but as soon as you start trying to drive in any way sportingly, it just wastes power. Renault's always done diffs extremely well, and this is no exception. What it allows you to do is just get on the power nice and early in the corner. You feel it just dragging you out, tightening that line. The other principal thing that you get with the Megane RS Cup chassis is firmer springs and dampers. And that's a slightly more mixed bag. As soon as I got into this car, just to drive normally, you feel those firmer springs. You instantly start looking for the comfort option here, which does make things better, and you can drive it around every day, but I think still with passengers in the car, or just when you're not in the mood, this car's never really not in the mood. Our test car was fitted with optional 19-inch wheels, which fill the arches nicely, but probably don't help that rather intrusive ride quality. As such, I think I'd stick with the standard 18-inch rims. Don't get the idea that the firm setup is all bad, however. This is, after all, a hot hatch, and the suspension comes alive when you're driving hard. Point it down a bumpy B road with some conviction, and rather like the equally firm Focus RS, it suddenly makes sense. Loaded up and travelling quickly, it deals with big bumps incredibly well, putting those new hydraulic bump stops to use and showing the sophistication of damping that we have come to expect from Renault Sport. In the corners, this still has a lot of the old Megane Cup's DNA, but the steering is very sharp, and this seems to be something of a trait that we're seeing in quite a lot of performance cars now, particularly hot hatches actually. It was in the Fiesta ST, and it can make the car quite hard to drive smoothly, and I don't think we've got the same feel that we had in the old cars. You're not as connected to those front wheels and what's going on. The car still feels really agile, helped by that four-wheel steer, but it's just not quite the car that it was before. Still good, don't get me wrong, just not quite as pure. Other things to mention, well, obviously we've got the manual gearbox in this car. It's okay. I like a manual gearbox, obviously, and I would rather have it than the flappy paddle box, but it's not the greatest shift. It's a slightly odd gear knob actually, it's sort of thin and narrow. I think that can sometimes play quite a part in how a gear shift feels. I think I'd go perhaps for some aftermarket, just normal round item. Another thing I want to mention about the ergonomics is this steering wheel. It's quite chunky, it's not bad, but the stitching is right where the crook of your thumb goes. It's important, these things, because it's just annoying. It's exactly where you want your thumbs to be. So please correct that, Renault. You're better than that. From one slightly irritating ergonomic point to a very good point, and this is something that I've seen people criticise. Renault does their audio controls just down here by the steering wheel, and I think it's brilliant. I love it. I don't know why people don't like it. It's just, they fall perfectly to hand as soon as you know what all the buttons do. Completely intuitive. Keep doing it, Renault. Don't give up. I'm rooting for it. Overall, the Megane RS is still such a focused car to drive. The diff is great. The chassis feels really sharp. I love the way you can get it into corners. I just wish there was more steering feel once you were actually in the corner. The brakes, the Brembo's still really good. So what to conclude about this new Megane? Well, clearly the Cup chassis is the option to have, but there's a sense perhaps that this car has now fallen between two stools really. It's wanting to appeal more to Golf GTI owners, I suppose, because it's now 5-door only and it's certainly much more habitable in here, but that has compromised some of the usual RS Megane characteristics.
If I sound a little conflicted, possibly even confused in my opinions, then that's because, well, I am. The tricky thing for this latest Megane RS is that it really needs the Cup chassis for it to start to make sense as a driver's car and a classic Renault Sport hot hatch. However, the firmer suspension of the Cup chassis then compromises the everyday appeal that Renault seemingly wanted to achieve with its latest version. The agility and damping of the car when pushed hard are brilliant, but then the steering lacks the feedback of its predecessors and the gearbox is only so-so. All of which leaves it slightly in no man's land in terms of customer appeal.
It's still really enjoyable to drive, but I think now there's even more than before, definitely room for a trophy version. If you enjoyed this review of the Megane, or perhaps if you didn't, perhaps you think, I want to know more, well, just click up here. You'll be taken to the original review. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, we really do appreciate it.